The CD contains the right presentation. Okay? And the CD is also, again, here's my contact information. If you want to get an updated copy of the slides from earlier today and from right now, as well as some of the demonstrations that I'm going through, then you can go out to this website. For those of you that have the wireless links, you can. It's not that big. It'll be done downloading before the end of the presentation. Okay, so. But yes, we do know, and I have informed Jeff of the issue with the printing, and that will be rectified. As soon as we're done today, I'm going to email a copy of the presentations to Jeff and make sure those get put up on the Black Hat site.
Are the tools available there also?
The question was, are the tools available? Now, the Perl scripts that I wrote that I'm using in the demonstrations, yes, those are available. The other tools, since they're available at the sysinternal side, or they're available at Foundstone, or available on the resource kit, I'm not going to include those. And the reason being is it just makes the zipped archive a little smaller, a little easier to download, and most of us know where the tools are anyway. Okay. Again, that's updated slides and demos. Now, the purpose of this presentation is to discuss different ways of hiding data. Now, I know what the title says, and to be honest, that's not what I didn't even originally intend to approach that. I'm going to talk about ways you can hide data on the system. I'm also going to talk about ways you can detect this activity. Okay, but what I'm not going to talk about is hiding data in Slack. I'm not going to talk about hiding data in boot sectors. I'm not going to talk about maintenance records, maintenance tracks on a drive. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just predominantly NTFS. Because actually that's where about half the presentation comes from, is the NTFS file system. And what's being hidden? What are we going to hide? What kind of data are we going to hide? You can hide text output, you can hide commands, you can hide binaries, you can hide images, any sequence of ones and zeros. You want to hide some programs. For instance, if you have a system that several people might be using, and this might be applicable at home, you might want to use some of these techniques to hide the data from those teenage kids that you've got, those curious kids who want to know, hey, what happens with this? Or if you notice your son comes walking in from school, or your daughter even, with the latest copy of 2600, you might want to take a look at some of these techniques. Also hiding games, that sort of thing, rootkits. Okay, who are we hiding it from? You can hide data from the users. Not too difficult. Hide data from an administrator. Again, really, that's really not too difficult. And that's not a disparaging comment to the system administrators. It's just a lot of people aren't familiar with some of these techniques. And some of these techniques I'm going to be talking about are as old as DOS itself. Some people just aren't familiar with it. And ultimately, in the case that somebody may choose to do so, hide the data or obscure it from an investigator or a forensics analyst. And there are ways that you can go about doing this. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not just presenting this information as a how-to, even though it is that. It is in fact a how-to. I'm also going to be presenting ways that you can detect this type of activity. Okay, one of the simplest ways to hide some data is to simply change the file name. That's it. Change the location on the file system, change the file name, change the file extension. That's pretty simple. Somebody wants to do a search of the hard drive of all the JPEG images, or all the MPEGs or MP3s or AVIs or whatever the case may be, change the file extension, and it's not picked up in however the search is configured. It's pretty simple. Also, we're going to talk about file signatures. Now this actually has to do with the data in the file, and it's not necessarily associated with the file name or the file extension. Now everybody's familiar in here with the fact that file extension information and what associated programs are maintained in the registry, right? So when you double click on a particular file, based on its extension, there's an executable that might be associated with it. Okay. Just a quick example. You want to run samdump, pwdump, the output of loftcrack, whatever the case may be. You create a file. You move it to a place where it might not be noticed, into the System32 directory, which is full of these little files or big files called DLLs. Nobody likes to touch those. They're just there. Yeah, they're very useful for the system. They're required for the operation of the system. But not very many people want to go opening up one in a hex editor. Change the file name to msodbc32.dll. Fairly innocuous, kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense that it's part of the system, so somebody might not want to go looking at it. Altering the file signature. According to the Microsoft website, a file signature is defined as a particular string or a particular sequence of information that's stored in the first 20 bytes of the file. Now this is the technique that's used by Encase, the forensics tool as well, when it does its file signature analysis. It looks at information in the first 20 bytes of the file, and the reason it's in the first 20 bytes is it's variable as to where it actually occurs. For instance, in an executable file, most often, not always, but most often, the first 2 characters of an executable file are cap M, cap Z. Just for those of you that have your computers open right now, just use Notepad to open up a DLL or .exe file. Okay, and the reason I say most often is because it's not always the first 2, but it's always cap M, cap Z. That denotes an executable file. If you get something that's got a DLL extension, or if you've got something that's a .exe extension, and it does not contain MZ in the first couple bytes of the file, it is not an executable. JPEGs and GIFs. A JPEG has the characters cap J, F, I, F in that space in the first 20 bytes of the file. That's what defines a JPEG file. GIF images have GIF 89A or 87A, depending on which version. One of the scripts available on my website, and I'll be demonstrating today, one of the Perl scripts, is actually a file that performs signature analysis. And I stated this before, but for those of you that weren't here for the first half of the presentation, I like to use Perl. It's a very quick, very quick language for prototyping certain things. And for people like me that like to make it clear as to what's going on and document it and everything, it's usually fairly easy to understand what's going on through the process. So a lot of these tools that I write, for my own use or whatever, I will prototype them in Perl so that other people can see what's going on and post them on the web. Maybe somebody can either do it better or use the tool. DOS attributes. Believe it or not, this still works. Setting the hidden bit with the attrib command still works for hiding data from not just unsuspecting users, but perhaps even from unsuspecting administrators who aren't necessarily looking for hidden information. So using the attrib command, you can set or unset that bit or that attribute. There are settings that you can use in Explorer that will show you hidden files. There's a switch with the dir command that will show you hidden files or directories, but it's not in there by default. You have to actually add that switch in. If you want to, as we talked about in the previous presentation, if you want to see what different switches are associated with the command, just type the command, follow it with /?, and most often you'll get some syntax information. Now, some of the functions of Perl, like opendir, readdir, and glob, completely ignore DOS attributes. So if you use a Perl program, or if part of what your Perl program does is open up a directory and read all the files in it, you're going to get every file or every subdirectory listed in there, regardless of the fact that it's got a hidden attribute set. And also, hfind.exe from the Foundstone website will help you find hidden files. But again, it's not difficult to hide a file. Now, file splitting. This is something that's it's not new at all. It's actually been around for quite a long time, since almost the beginnings of DOS. Sometimes you'll get a file that's a certain size and it's much bigger than a diskette, and you want to get it off the system, and if you don't have a CD-ROM burner in it, you want to get that file off the system, it's not networked, then what you can do is use a file splitter and create segments to that file. Decompose that file into arbitrary size segments. Now, when we originally had DOS, those were mostly command line utilities. Then as we moved into Windows 95, a lot of that functionality was moved into the shell programming. So now you can right click and you can say, I want to split the file, depending on what application you load on your system. However, like most system administrator or root utilities that are very functional to the administrator, they're also very functional to the attacker. And you can use this file splitting technique in combination with other techniques we're going to look at. You can use it for malicious purposes to effectively hide data. Okay, this is basically a little quick graphic just to kind of break up the monotony of continual text slides to kind of show you what the file splitting looks like. Now, a lot of this stuff, there's no arbitrary set size. You can have a 50K file that you break up into segments of 2K or 5K, or just split it in half based on the file size. It's really totally up to you. Now, what you do with it after it's split is also up to you. Now, for those of you in here that do penetration testing, some of this, you might be familiar with this, you might already use it, or you might find it useful. It's an interesting way to hide some utilities depending on where you put the information. Who in here is familiar with the touch utility on Unix? Familiar with touch? Good. Okay. The Microsoft API provides for this functionality. Now, it's not used very often, and there are touch utilities out there. However, most of the executable touch utilities, the .exe files that I've come across, will only modify the last access and the last modification times. I'm going to show you a demonstration where we can also modify the creation date as well. Remember, we're talking about hiding data from a whole spectrum of people. When forensics analysts make a bit-level copy of the drive, one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things they will look for is a timeline of activity. If a malicious user, say somebody's got pornography, just as an example, or security tools like a sniffer, if they can modify the last access time to a date when they weren't even in the building, when they were not even at work, say you take a 2-week vacation and you modify the last access time of that file to when you were on vacation, the fact that you were on vacation at that time is documented by the company. The fact that you didn't log on for those 2 weeks should also be documented by the company if they've got the right auditing turned on. It may even be documented on your machine, depending on what loads and what's written to the event log when you boot your machine. Now imagine what that can do to a forensics investigation or an incident response investigation. This hides activity from the use of the dir command, and it will also hide the activity because you've changed the times from the afind command, which is a tool written by J.D. Glazer from Foundstone that looks for the last access times. J.D.'s got a very good presentation from one of the Black Hats, I think 2000, where somebody had broken into one of his boxes via an exploit in iMail. And one of the first things he did, as he related in the presentation, was look for the last access time on the file cmd.exe. And that last access time was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he knew he wasn't there. So based on that information alone, he had plenty to go on, at least to get started to look for what happened in that incident. And like I said, he gave this in a presentation. You can find that presentation under the Black Hat archives. I believe it's 2000. I don't remember the exact title. This is an interesting functionality. File binding. Who remembers whack-a-mole? Remember getting hit by whack-a-mole? You know, kind of grates on your nerves. You're walking up and down the cube farm or maybe going along a row of offices and you see people playing whack-a-mole. Well, as far as I understood anyway, file binding was used. There's plenty of utilities out there to do file binding. Bind a illegitimate or malicious file to a legitimate, supposedly legitimate file in the exe, you know, a game, a legitimate file that some user is going to double click on and it's going to execute. It's also going to execute the other files. Utilities like Elite Wrap, Saran Wrap, and Silk Rope are actually associated with the BO2K when that came out for binding different files together. This is another way of hiding data. Now this is something that I have to be honest with you, I really haven't done a lot of research into because the COM API from Microsoft scares me, and I don't really want to I'm afraid to know that much about Microsoft, and especially the API. But according to the MSDN, this is defined as structured storage or compound files, or more loosely, a file system within the file. Now, the information from the Microsoft site says this is predominantly used in Word documents, and it's also used in Excel documents. However, this does not prevent somebody knowledgeable of COM programming from using it. That also presents some interesting opportunities, because if anybody's done any Java programming, anybody done Java programming? Anybody? Bueller? Okay. Java has a serialization. Some programming languages, Perl has something similar to this, where you can create an object and serialize it into basically just a stream of bits. And using the right API, you can reassemble it at a later date. Well, that presents a lot of opportunities for proprietary formats, something you define yourself. So if you're say a penetration tester, and you're targeting a specific type of platform, you have your toolkit, have the tools that you use. If you specialize in, say, penetrating Windows 2K systems or IIS systems, you'll have your nice little CD full of tools. Well, you might also have that little rootkit or that little hacker kit that you've got. Once you get in, you copy your tools over, and you progress on from there using that system as a stepping stone. Well, you might want to use something like this to further your efforts. One of my personal favorites. NTFS alternate data streams. Is anybody familiar with these? Everybody knows all about them, right? Okay. NTFS alternate, yeah, I see Corey over there smiling. He's heard this one before. NTFS alternate data streams are a feature of NTFS. The original intent was to support the Macintosh hierarchical file system. The Macintosh HFS allows for the storage of information in different streams. So on the Windows systems, in order to support the HFS, we have this thing called alternate data streams. And what this does, if we have what's referred to as a default or unnamed stream, and this is basically myfile.txt or kernel32.dll or winword.exe, we can actually append additional alternate streams to that file. If you're familiar with how the information on a particular file is stored in the MFT, there's different attributes in there. And one of the attributes will point to the place on the hard drive, the physical address on the hard drive, to the beginning of that file. And you can actually have multiple versions of that. So you will have the default unnamed stream, and then you will have alternate streams all associated with that file. But the interesting thing is, Microsoft does not provide you with any utilities to view these. Not in Explorer, not in DIR, not from the command prompt. Provides an excellent opportunity for somebody with malicious intent to hide something from administrators. Fairly simple to do. Now, recently, in the past 2 years or so, there have been a lot of utilities that come out. But again, you have to go to another site, whether it's heysoft.de, it's HEYSOFT.de. That's one of the better tools that I prefer to use. Foundstone has got a tool called SFind in their forensics toolkit. So if you go looking for SFind, you won't find it. You have to find the forensics toolkit. Sysinternals has streams.exe. And there's a company called Crucial Security, all one word, crucialsecurity.com, and they have a free download that's actually a nice little GUI tool. And it's good to use on the local box, but if you're doing incident response, you might want to have something that spits its output to standard output. So you don't have to save a file to the local system. Now, the interesting thing about this is not only can you hide stuff in it, but you can hide executables. And then you can launch those executables from within the alternate data stream. About a month ago, I found a page on the web. It really wasn't associated with any sort of computer security or anything like that. It was just like an informational page. And it said, in order to run executables hidden in alternate data streams, you have to first copy that executable out of the alternate data stream into a temporary file. This is incorrect. You do not have to do that. You can actually launch it. And we're going to talk about briefly some differences between NTFS 4 and NTFS 5. A little bit more about creating alternate data streams. At the end of this presentation, we're actually, just like the last presentation, we're going to go through some demonstrations. Those of you with your systems here can follow along. You follow along on the screen, and we'll walk through some different techniques for alternate data streams. I've got a couple other demos to show, but the alternate data streams are really kind of pretty cool. The first command here that you can use is simply type. I don't have the full path for Notepad. You'll need to use that. But this is one way of creating an alternate data stream, the type command. That's it. Now, you can use cat or CP or cp.exe from the resource kit to create alternate data streams. Move and copy commands that are on your system. If you move or copy a file from one partition to another or from one directory to another, the alternate data stream will go along with it as long as it's NTFS. FTPing from a Microsoft system to another Microsoft system will not preserve the alternate data streams. In fact, one way to get rid of alternate data streams is to copy the file itself to a disparate operating system or a disparate file system. That's one way. You can not only bind to a file, but you can also bind to just a straight directory listing. You can associate an alternate data stream or a series of alternate data streams with the directory listing. And because these are not necessarily, or these cannot be viewed with the default tools on the system, they provide a great avenue for not only administrators hiding things from users, or from other administrators, as the case may be, but it also provides an opportunity for malicious use. For instance, just simply copying a 300K DLL over and over and over into alternate data streams until the file system is full. Not being an Exchange administrator, I understand this has a very negative effect on Exchange machines. Okay, executing alternate data streams. Again, you do not have to copy the executable out of the alternate data stream in order to run it. You run it right from within the alternate data stream. Now, for NTFS 4, for those of you familiar with hacking exposed, I'm a big proponent for giving credit where credit is due. I did not come up with any of this stuff. I'm presenting the information. The Foundstone guys, with the first edition of Hacking Exposed, when they talked about streams on NTFS 4, which is basically NT 4.0, they showed a way to execute executables hiding in alternate data streams. And that's simply with a start command. You can't just type it at the command prompt, but if you type the start command or use the start command, you can launch those executables. Now, Zenkin and Kaspersky, I apologize for any mispronunciation of that name, have an article out on the web that lists five ways to launch executables and VBS scripts from within alternate data streams. 5 different ways. So as we progress from NT to 2000, we see, well, we got this thing that works over here on NT, but now we also have more native tools available to us on Windows 2000. So that provides us with greater opportunity to launch some of these things. So if you have administration scripts, if you like to write scripts in VBS, hide them in an alternate data stream. They're not going to be readily found. Now, the key, though, to running them is you have to know that they're there. And you have to know the name. Mistype the name, it's not going to execute properly. Now, detecting alternate data streams, again, one of my favorite tools is LADS by Frank Hein. We also have sfind, streams, and there's a Perl script that I modified from Dave Roth's second book. The reason I modified it is because it only detected alternate data streams associated with files. But again, you can associate alternate data streams with directory listings. Okay? At this point, do we have any questions about alternate data streams? I haven't done any exhaustive testing of these. For instance, I haven't done every possible test. I have looked at FTPing. I have looked at creating an alternate data stream associated with a GIF file on an IIS web server with NTFS and then attaching with my browser and downloading the file. I've tried that. I've tried a couple of the different antivirus tools, none of which have actually successfully accessed alternate data streams. Okay, so these are just some of the big questions. Now, I haven't tried every single possible antivirus tool that's out there. I have heard that Tripwire for NT in 2000 systems will actually look at alternate data streams. Hey, not bad. Can't verify it, but I've heard that. Encryption. This is another way of hiding data. Usually with tools like PGP, there's a big footprint on the system, though, because they have PGP. Okay. Fcrypt from the ntsecurity.nu website. It's a nice little utility. It'll just encrypt the file. Of course, we have the EFS file system. We also have some utilities available to Perl, particularly the crypt triple DES module. This is actually a per module. It runs on NT and 2000 as well as the Linux and Unix operating systems. It will just take an arbitrarily length size segment and just encrypt it. You give it a passphrase, it encrypts it. And you give it the passphrase again, you can decrypt it. It's very simple, very straightforward. We use that in one of the demonstrations. It does take a few minutes or a few seconds to run through depending on the size of the file. It may not be something you want to use, but if you're using it as something that's operating behind the scenes under the covers, then the fact that it takes a second or two really may not make such a huge difference. But the neat thing about this is that somebody can use this, and because the passphrase is something you can enter in at the command prompt or you can have hidden in your program someplace, then obviously you wouldn't be you wouldn't be using a Perl script to try to hide that, but the actual passphrase doesn't need to be on the system at all. It could be in your memory. There's a variety of ways to get the passphrase. You can run, one of the things that I thought of was go out to the web, grab a particular file like a GIF file, and do an MD5 checksum on that and use that checksum as your passphrase. And you can automate that. So I guess that if you find something that might have been encrypted this way or somebody says is encrypted this way, if you've read Applied Cryptography from Bruce Schneier, I think probably the only way to get that information is the rubber hose technique that he presents. Pretty effective. We talked about public caning in the last presentation. Okay. God. Tough crowd after lunch. Steganography. This is an interesting field. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about how it's done, but there are some interesting steps that have been taken forward, particularly by Neil Provost, since about the 30th to 31st of August of last year. Neil's got a nice little website up at the University of Michigan, and on that website he presents some research. For instance, how do you detect files that have been stegoed? And basically what he came up with in reading his paper was that if you know which tool was used to stego the file, or which technique was used to stego the file, and if that tool does not use efforts to obfuscate the fact that there's information stegoed in the file, then you can determine the probability that a file was stegoed. You don't necessarily find that the file was stegoed, you've determined the probability. And you have to thank Neil because he's got that one page, and then he's got maybe half a dozen articles on how to hide the fact. How do you randomize the information so it doesn't come up statistically that a file has been stegoed. So basically, when it really comes down to it, where the rubber meets the road, unless you know which tool the person was using because it's on the system, you really can't be sure that any file was stegoed. Some tools that are useful and pretty popular on the Windows system include stools 4. It's a very neat utility, and one of the benefits of it for somebody that's trying to hide data is the fact that if you take a file, just a plain file, and you open it up in stools 4, it will automatically prompt you for the passphrase whether that file was stegoed or not. Kind of a neat little thing there. So you just can't start running files through it and say, oh, okay, only the ones that pop up a passphrase prompt have been stegoed. It doesn't work that way. Somebody took some efforts. Registry. You can hide information in the registry. Who goes and searches for information on the MSDN site? Regularly, irregularly, when they have to, when they're forced to, at gunpoint? Okay. If you deal with any of the articles on there that have to do with the registry, who actually reads the little disclaimer at the beginning of the Q article? Yes. And the disclaimer always says, if you mess with the registry, if you do something wrong, blah, 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 you'll never be able to boot your box again. It's a nice little threat, keeps most people out. Most people. Anybody that really knows about the structure of the registry isn't really, it's not the technological minefield that Microsoft presents it to be sometimes. And they're right to caution people, because you can not only screw up your box, but if you don't do things right as far as entering the values, you actually don't get the functionality that the Q article says. Because if you create the key in the wrong place, or you give it the wrong value, you just don't get that functionality. Also, software installation dates, information about software. A lot of people will say, I installed this version of this tool. I installed LoftCrack 2.5. Or I installed some unregistered version of some tool. I deleted it, and when I reinstalled it, it still tells me that my eval date is since passed. So they might be storing some information in an obscured place in the registry. Okay. Any questions so far? Yes, up front.
If a file is Stego, then it has changed, so the MD5 checksum would be different, and something like Tripwire would find it.
Okay, very good. The statement, not so much a question, was if a file was Stegoed, say a graphics file, for instance, was Stegoed, then the MD5 checksum would change. And you're absolutely right. However, if I open that file in a graphics editor and I simply change the size, I crop out all but the last pixel on one side and the last pixel across the bottom, I've then changed the file enough to alter the MD5 checksum. If I can go into that file, into that graphics file, and find a single bit, a single pixel represented by 8 bits, and flip the last bit, I don't do any significant changes to the file, but I have altered the MD5 checksum because that's how the MD5 checksum works. You're absolutely right. If the file is Stego, there will be changes picked up by an MD5 checksum. However, given all the other things that you can do to change the MD5 checksum, it's not conclusive. But yes, put it in, put that little piece of knowledge in the back of your brain, and that's something you can have in your toolkit. Hidden functionality. This doesn't mean that what we've done is we've hidden something from the administrator. We've simply used functionality that the administrator is not necessarily familiar with. Registry keys. In the other presentation, last presentation, we talked about various malware and uses what I refer to as the ubiquitous run key. Okay, there's another registry key. I won't mention the full path because it only appears once in the registry, but the name of the key is Appenitz DLL. Is anybody familiar with it at all? Okay, according to the Microsoft Q article on this particular registry key, whatever DLL is actually listed in this registry key, and by default it's blank, but whatever DLL is in there is automatically loaded into memory whenever a GUI application is started. It's primarily, as I understand it, primarily used for testing purposes. However, when most administrators look into the registry, they want to do a search, what tool do they use? Regedit, Regedit 32, and these are GUI applications. So you could effectively load a keylogger into memory. Open up Notepad. Notepad's a GUI. So there's hidden functionality on the system. Autorun.inf is something that worked on NT before it was patched. It was great because it not only worked for CDs, but it worked on local drives. When most people want to investigate or look at files on a drive, what do? My computer, oh, there's the icon for the C drive. I'll double click on it. Okay. How many of you actually right-clicked on that icon and saw what was in the drop-down box? Before it was patched, which was basically a registry change, but before it was patched, if you created an autorun.inf file in the root of the C drive, for instance, and you right-clicked on the C drive after you rebooted, you would see the word autorun, and it was highlighted. That means that's the default functionality. Okay? So I can put a couple of malicious commands in there. If I can get access to the administrator's box, put a couple of commands in there. Somebody comes over to the system, administrator logs on, double clicks on the drive icon, it runs whatever those commands are, and the last command I put in the file is to run to run the Explorer. So they might see a slight pause, but there's the functionality they expected. There's the window, it's opened up. Okay? Now, when I was working for a telecom company, I never actually saw this, but I heard that one of the things people would do if they had user access to their box was report a problem to the help desk and create an autorun.inf file in the root of the C drive so that when the help desk came down, as they were coming down, they would reboot the box. So help desk would come over, type in the help desk user, type in their password. They had administrator access to the box. And so I got a problem with my email. It's giving me some kind of warning that it can't find the Eudora executable. Oh, okay. Double click on the C drive. Bang. That person has just gotten somebody with administrator access to add that person's user to the administrator group. Or done other things, loaded a Trojan, whatever the case may be. Okay? Hidden functionality. Startup directories are a good place to look. We talked at the last presentation, when you install Office on a system, there's this file that's put on the system called FindFast. And as we saw in our PS listing, it was running. It was, one of the processes. Well, it's put in one of the startup directories. So if somebody malicious wanted to put a Trojan on, why make a footprint in the registry at all when all you really have to do is overwrite the FindFast executable? Take the Sub7 server, call it FindFast. And finally, most people familiar with Unix are probably familiar with this, and this is actually, one of those techniques you can find on the kiddie sites, but the hosts file. Is anybody familiar with what this does? Everybody know? Okay. This is a neat way to play with your kids at home or something. I don't necessarily recommend it at work, but if you edit the host file appropriately, and somebody says goes to Yahoo all the time, the first thing they do when they come into work, they type in www.yahoo.com, or Yahoo is their homepage. So when they open up, say Netscape, it opens to Yahoo. Well, you go in and you put the IP address to the CNN website in there, and you edit the file appropriately. It'll say Yahoo initially, but it'll automatically map them over to the CNN website. Again, that's the type of functionality that I'm talking about. Hidden functionality. It's not necessarily new, but it's out there, and people can use this stuff for malicious purposes. So it's best that the administrators and people dealing with these types of situations, dealing with these operating systems, are familiar. Just be familiar with the types of things that can go on out there. As I mentioned in the first presentation, a lot of the forensics analysts that I talk to, when they have to go to court as an expert witness, they're not really questioned so much on the tool that they use. Did you make a copy with SafeBack? Did you use Encase, and which version? No, that's not the question. The questions they get asked are about methodology. Do you always look for alternate data streams? Or in the case of my client, was he special? Something like that. Okay. I used to be an aficionado of Berkeley Breathed. Anybody familiar with this cartoon? Bloom County? Okay. This is actually taken from a 1984 strip. I think it's 4 or 5 panels long. It was a poem. Now, I'm not going to repeat the poem, but this is the part that I take away from it. Life is fine when things combine, like ham and beef chow mein in this case. And there's, take my word for it, there's a rhyme there. But it's interesting because if we simply combine our techniques, say we do file splitting, and then we do something else, and then we touch the file. We combine these techniques, and we obfuscate our activities even further. Okay. Now, one of the demonstrations we've got today, it's actually a Perl script, and even though I do have it print some stuff to the standard output, and the Perl script is available in the archive, and it will also be available, or the zipped archive on my website. It will also be available through the Black Hat archive, which I will send in to Jeff after we're done here today. But the idea is, I'm going to have some information, and I'm going to encrypt the data. This is something I can do. Well, if it's encrypted, it's just a bunch of stuff. And it might not necessarily match, depending on the file extension I use, like a DLL or something, it might not necessarily match what other DLLs look like. Remember we said that DLLs start with MZ in the beginning? Well, how do we get around that? Well, one way is to simply just change the first 2 characters, change the signature. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, we have to remember to do, have to remember to change that back. Another way to do it is to reach out to a legitimate file and just, a surrogate file like kernel32.dll and strip, say, the first 200 or 300 bytes off of that and just slap it onto the front of ours. Okay, who's really going to keep reading after about 300 bytes? Open it up in a hex editor. Okay, yeah, I see the header information. Does not run in DOS mode, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now here's all this data. Good, fine, whatever. Nobody's really going to go beyond that. Most people. So we can combine the different techniques. If we know who we're trying to hide this from, if you just want to hide it from a user, Maybe attrib plus H will work. Or moving it to a different location, not the default location, or changing the path on the system. Maybe that'll work. You know, for those of you that have systems at home and have, have these teenage sons or even teenage daughters that are coming of age and really curious about the computer and whatnot, and they're reading stuff on the internet that, might concern you if you find 2600.com in your history file or something. You might want to use a different technique. You might want to use something else, or just say, hey, keep off my system. Okay, now I want to talk briefly about how we're going to detect and or prevent this type of activity from occurring. One way is we can react to it, and the other way is to basically observe the activity going on real time. Now the reactive mode goes back to what we talked about in the first presentation about preparing for an incident. What do we have available to us on the system that we can use? Now, we're not talking about going out and spending thousands of dollars for a third-party tool. Let's use what's on the system. Oh, well, we get user permissions. What is the user capable of doing? We can modify those to meet our needs. We've got SACLs and DACLs, system access controls and discretionary access controls. We can say, well, the user can't access anything in this directory, or the user can't write to this directory, or can't create files. In most cases, the user does need to read and execute certain files in certain directories just to be able to log on. So you don't want to restrict that. But you can use the DACLs to restrict what they can do, like create new files, write to registry keys. You may even have registry keys on there that your testing has shown you don't even want the user to be able to read. You don't want them to be able to enumerate keys, because the keys don't particularly pertain to any sort of application information or anything like that. Maybe it's something proprietary that you put on there for your organization to identify that machine, and you don't want them to be able to read it. Only administrators can. Okay. Tools like Tripwire are very interesting tools. They create MD5 checksums. They're very valuable tools. But the thing about them is they require a baseline, because you have to. It does no good to simply generate an MD5 checksum on a file unless you're going to compare it to another MD5 checksum at a later date. So it requires a baseline. It requires a little extra work, a little extra thought ahead of time. How am I going to go about doing this? Where am I going to store the data? How am I going to secure it, make sure it's not altered before the next time I have to use it? But it is a very effective tool. I know that there's certain military organizations out there that are using MD5 checksums on Solaris systems. Whenever they suspect an incident, they just run their Tripwire tool. It's not necessarily Tripwire, it's a similar tool. But that'll help them determine any files that were changed. So it's pretty much run by root. It's regardless, just completely disregards permissions and looks for any files that were changed. Actually pretty effective. But again, if you're running it on an NT or 2000 system, you want to make sure it takes certain things like alternate data streams into account. I bet you all like that sound of me sipping, right? Okay. We also, if we're going to use our SACLs and DACLs, you're going to have to start monitoring the event log. I mean, what's the sense of setting these things if you're not going to look for them? You want to prevent the activity? Okay. Maybe you don't want to log it. That's fine. You just want to prevent it from happening. But maybe for certain users, you do want to monitor this type of activity. You do want to see when it's happening. And again, there's multiple ways that you can go about collecting this information from systems. And you don't have to pay a lot of money to do it or to implement it. Perl's a good way to do it. There's third-party tools. There's free syslog clients and servers. It's great stuff. But you have to make sure you enable the appropriate auditing. Does anybody here check the Mountain Wave news site? They've got some news on their website, mountainwave.com. Okay. It's pretty good. It's not updated all the time, but Mountain Wave has a product called CyberWolf, which is not so much an IDS as it is a log normalization tool. But they will not load their agents on an NT or 2000 or any system really, unless certain settings have been made or changed on that system. If you do not have auditing turned on, they won't load the agent on. And why is that? It's the old GIGO, garbage in, garbage out principle. If you're not auditing and you're not providing your audit infrastructure with information, then you're not going to see anything happening. Okay, if you're running a fat file system and you don't really have any auditing turned on, not that, without the NTFS file system you can do a whole lot with a file system, but you're just not going to get anything. I mean, basically it's a sacrificial box that can be easily used by a malicious user to get in and do all sorts of weird things. It just boggles the mind. Periodic scans. Verification scans. If you have a way of collecting information, such as the PwC guys talked about yesterday, well, automate it. Run it periodically. Look for changes. Write your results from the last scan to a text file. That's easy. Perl was originally developed to deal with text files. Perl stands for Practical Extraction and Reporting Language. Well, that's, I guess, one of the things it stands for. But it's very powerful when it comes to manipulating text files or looking at text files. So you go through, you do your scan, you collect the information, save it to a text file. Keep it on a protected directory on your box. At a later time, rerun the scan and see what changed. See if anything changed. Sometimes no news is good news. If you have all these warnings that pop up that say, oh, file changed, file added, whatever the case may be, then the fact that you don't have anything in your inbox or anything in the report when you get there the next day, that could be a good thing. And with the appropriate settings, some of these techniques can be considered real time. However, one of the things I found that is real time and actually looks like it's very beneficial to replacing or backing up, maybe would be a better term, the file and object access. If you're going to monitor who accesses what files, you have to turn on the file and object access auditing, and then you have to go to the file and say, okay, I want to know when somebody read this, or somebody did this, or somebody did that. But even if you just open the file, a lot of times you'll get maybe 2 or 3 entries. So it's kind of difficult to understand and go through all that information. And it seems like you're inundated, using the fire hose technique with all this information when somebody just opens and closes a file. Now, you can automate going through that, but we've got other things that we can do as well in real time. One of the things I found is a Perl module called Win32, and it's ADV Notify, but it stands for Advanced Notification. This uses the Microsoft API that's designed such that if file events, when a file is created, modified, or deleted, these file events are generated. Now, Microsoft has an API for tracking these things. And the author of this module has gone through and actually added quite a bit of functionality above and beyond the Change Notify module, which is available through Reactive State. And it's actually very, very interesting. And I'm actually going to include that as part of the demo today. One thing you do want to be careful of, and before I go on, this is available on my website. If you go to the main website, there's a link to the Perl, and there's just a page for Perl scripts. It's called FSW, with File System Watcher. And it's pretty interesting. You just have to be careful when you're implementing things like this if you're going to create a log file. Because the first file change, and you please take the benefit of my experience with this, the first file change that you get writes to the log file. Well, the next file change after that is the log file. And if you're not careful, you can consume a lot of CPU time, and in a couple seconds end up with 5 megabytes of data, all because you keep adding entries to that one file. So be careful using this, please. You can also combine it with several other Perl modules that are available. Dave Roth's Win32 daemon for creating NT or 2000 services. If you don't want to store the information on the box and you have a syslog server already, just send the information out over syslog. Just take advantage of that, the type of functionality you already have on your network. Okay, at this point, throughout this portion of the presentation, do we have any questions? Any questions at all? Nobody. Okay. All right. I'm going to go over and we're going to take a look at a couple of demonstrations. But the first thing I need to do is to really make this meaningful. Bless you. I'm going to open up start running the file system watcher there. Okay? That's the output. So far, that's all it's done. It's going to watch the system32 directory. Oh, well, that's a default. Maybe I don't want to do that. So I kill it. How about if we watch the entire C drive? There we go. So basically what this is supposed to do, anytime there's a file event generated, it'll wake up, catch that event. And you notice we have this running just for curiosity. Let me open up the task manager. Okay. Oh, there you go. Oh, you know, with all the stuff running on the system, you know, we're fluctuating, but it's not consuming a whole lot of CPU time. I mean, it's not like we have a massive consumption of the CPU or memory just because we started running this. Okay, so that's just going to sit there, and it's the program's going to wake up when it needs to. All right, now, okay. Okay, who wants to create some alternate data streams? God. Okay. Okay, you're just going to take my word for it and take the presentation. Okay, fine. I'll do it. Okay. We're going to use a type command. NT notepad.d. I'll tell you what, let's do this first. I like to use LADs. We'll look at the current directory. That's what LAD says. See, there's the website. There's where you can get it. It says use LADs at your own risk. Well, yeah, okay, fine. It doesn't. It hasn't messed up anything on my system since I've been using it through the various versions. It seems to be pretty stable. But it's telling us that in this particular directory, we have no alternate data streams. Okay, so let's do this. Type notepad.exe. Oops, sorry, we need the full path.
Is that in System 32?
Excuse me?
Is Notepad in System 32?
Is it? Okay, just for you. We'll go back. Okay. All right. Jeez. You know, here I am asking for questions, and
And you complain about it when you get one.
yeah, go figure, huh? Okay, let's see. What do we want to do with this? Let's see. I don't know. Do I want to do that? Well, let's try that. Okay. Well. Okay. Let's see if we really did create an alternate data stream. Whew, whoa, there it is. Remember it said 0 before? Okay. Let's try something else. Oops. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Wow. There we go. We get 2 of them, same size. All right. Now,
Do a DIR.
how are we going to use it? You want me to do a DIR? All right. There we go. God, I love this. It's all noisy and stuff. I can't even burp, though. See, there we go. myfile.txt. I didn't have it in there. I created it. It's 0 bytes. But I don't see np.exe anywhere up here. But LADs told us that we have 2 np.exes in different locations. But it's not anywhere up here at all.
Delete myfile.text.
Okay. God, I ask for questions, I get orders. This is great. Not complaining. Not complaining. Now run LADs again. Okay. Whoop. There we go. Whatever properties are associated with the default stream are also associated with the alternate streams. The alternate data stream does not have any MAC times in and of its own. It does not have any permissions associated solely with that alternate data stream. They're all associated with the default unnamed stream of the file. Cool. Okay. Now, we have this one alternate data stream. What can we do with it?
Run it.
Run it! Yeah. Yes, sir.
Can you hide a folder full of data? Say what?
Sure, why not? Yeah. The question was, can you hide a folder full of data? Now, I'm not going to say yes to the actual file structure, but anything in any files in the folder, any files in the subfolders, yeah, you can hide them the same way. As long as you got the disk space, you can dump it in an alternate data stream, wherever you want. Yes, sir.
You said you could create an executable file in the data stream. Can you time log it to automatically walk along?
We're going to look at that. Yeah. The question was, can you time it to go off on its own? Yeah. If you can execute an arbitrary file, which we'll do, let's try this. I'll tell you what, let's start with the technique presented by the guys in Foundstone, the one that works on NTFS 4. Let's start with that. Let's see, hold on. Okay, let's attach it to the directory. Huh. You think so? Oh. Okay. Don't worry, I believe it. I've done this before. It's okay. Okay. Let's try this. Let's do this. C:\\. What do you think? Why not? Yeah, I have. Well, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's do type C:\NT. So you made me delete the one I had before. Made me. Okay. So we run lads. Okay, we got the both of them are back. Okay, let's try. Start C:\. Yeah, it's probably my spelling is what did it. Oops. That's not the error message. What is that? That's Notepad. By simply modifying the technique from NTFS 4, simple modification, it works. Now, on NTFS 4, we just didn't need the complete path. But also on NTFS 4, if it was associated with the directory listing, you could also run it. And as we just saw, we couldn't run it if it was associated with the directory listing. But if it's associated with a file, we can execute it. Yes, sir?
A tool that lists what files are located on the system where executables are running.
Yeah.
Does it list that in myfile.txt?
Well, let's take a look. God, I love this. Now the questions are starting to come up. You guys are waking up. This is good. This is actually something that appeared on the vulndev list. We actually talked about this. There's a huge thread on this. Somebody started off the question, and the question was, how do I hide data on Windows 2000? And my response to that thread, it wasn't the first response, but my response was, well, I don't want to just post my Black Hat presentation, but, I just wanted to get in there. And this is one of the things we did look at. Let's take a look at Task Manager. Okay, we'll look at the processes. Oh, first let's look at applications that are running. Okay. Let's get Notepad running. Okay. Let's go look at processes. I don't see a Notepad or an np.exe. Well, wait a minute, what's that?
That looks funny.
Doesn't it though? Yeah, that's odd. Hold on a second. Let me do this. And close this. I'll leave Notepad running. Let me go to cd.bh demo 1. Remember we took a look at the process listings? Huh. Well, there it is. myfile.txt, but not Notepad. Hopefully you're beginning to see why I kind of like this topic of alternate data streams. This is great stuff. Now, every now and then you'll find somebody on the list that says, hey, I do penetration testing. I use this stuff all the time. A forensics analyst in the UK asked me, what does this look like in Encase? I said, I don't know. Why don't you create an alternate data stream and find out? Next thing I know, I get a couple of GIF files, and that's what he did. He went and did screen captures, trimmed them down, and showed me, I created these alternate data streams. This is what they look like in Encase. So, With the right tools like LADs and streams and sfind and whatnot, you're not going to hide them from people that have access to those tools. But if those tools aren't available and they're not on the system, this is a great way to hide data. Okay. Let's take a look at a couple of others. I've got a, let me kill this notepad first. Let's take a look at, I mentioned Visual Basic Script, VBS scripts. Okay. Let's do this. WScript test VBS. Cool. Can everybody read that? Can everybody see that back there? It says, welcome to Black Hat.vbs test file. Okay, great. Let's see what that file looks like. Notepad test.vbs. Okay, there it is. That's it. It's the entire contents of the file. Nothing malicious, but yeah, you know, we can write something malicious in there. All right. Now, let's do this. Let's type test.vbs, and let's go ahead and add it to myfile.txt, and we'll kill two birds with one stone. Okay. Run LADs. Oh, there we go. See? One file. 0 bytes in that file. And yet, we've got almost 5,100 bytes, or 51,000 bytes associated to alternate data streams just right there. Now, what are we going to do to run this? Yes, sir.
Maybe further confusing if they don't have access to the tools. What happens if you name that hidden data stream, the alternate data stream, the same as the primary stream? MyFile.txt, MyFile.txt.
Interesting. What happens if you name the alternate data stream the same name? Oh, let's take a look. Let's first take a look at the contents of this file. Oops. Let's see what happens. Huh. There we go. Okay. What happens if we just do this? 0 bytes. Kind of what we expect, right? Okay. Let's try. Let's go back to the type command. Huh, no error message. See what LADs has to say. There it goes. Let's try. There you go.
Will this also be identified as a process?
Well, let's take a look. God, you guys, I don't have to remember the demos. You guys are guiding me right through them. This is great. Okay, let's see. So we used WScript the first time. Let's try it this time. There you go. Let's see. What else is native that we can try?
Do WScript myfile.txt : myfile.txt.
Okay.
See if it cares about extensions.
Yeah, let's take a look. See if it cares about extensions. There's no script engine. Let's try something else. Let's try this. Okay. WScript is native to Windows 2000. So is CScript. Huh. Okay. Neat.
Try with myfile.txt also.
Okay. You're curious. Where's your box? No, I'm just kidding. This is why we're here. No script engine. Same error message. All right.
MyFile.txt don't have
Really?
VC post.
You mean the first one or the second one?
The first one.
Really? You think it would make a difference? You do?
So when you see it running out there, you ignore it.
Huh?
That way, when you see it running out there, when the system admin sees it running out there, they'll just ignore it.
Ah. Yeah, there's other ways around that.
But if I saw a process running called myfile.txt, I would definitely question what that process was.
You would. You would. Okay? I think I've related this before, and Corey knows this because he was there to see it. We had an individual in a class I was teaching that said, you know, he sat in the front of the class, just arms crossed across his chest. You can't teach me anything. So the lab, I decided we didn't use alternate data streams. We used other techniques. I took netcat, nc.exe. We copied it onto the system in the system32 directory, called it inetinfo.exe, and launched it from the command line listening on port 80. And the only clue he had was there's a Trojan on the system. I didn't give anybody any tools, but at the same time, I didn't say you can't use any tools. They had internet access. Okay? So this guy opened up event log, task manager. I said, well, you got a Trojan on your system. He goes, look, I can see what I've got. I've got a web server. Really? He goes, yeah. It says inetinfo here. That's executable for the web server. And netstat tells me port 80 is open. Really? Okay. Well, what services do you have running? Well, oddly enough, IIS wasn't listed. Okay? Did you telnet to port 80? Did you connect to port 80 with anything? Telnet's already on the system, so, you know. Did you telnet to port 80? No. Okay. How do you know you don't have a Trojan on the system? Actually, another interesting question I got from that same class was actually pretty funny. It's, why do people do this? Why do people want to hide data? Why do people want to break into my system? Well, because they can. What's on everybody's system about this time of the year, or maybe a month from now? Everybody. Yes. Yeah, tax returns. If you're using tax cut or something like that. Lots of information, social security numbers, addresses, financial information, pictures, you know. Even home users, you know. Home users have got information. Let's see, what's one of the more famous home users that were in the news in the past couple of years? Deutsch, maybe? Why would somebody want to get into his system? Yeah, back there, yeah. Former head of the CIA? Yeah, going home on his home system, connected to the internet. His kids used it. Come on, you know. A couple alternate data streams on his system. Okay, let's see. What else can we do, though? I know. What if we created a shortcut? That's another way that we can launch executables. You know, you have a shortcut, because you can put shortcuts on the desktop. You can put shortcuts in the startup directory. Let's take a look at a shortcut. So let's see. Where did we hide the executable? We got, okay, myfile.txt. So let's go ahead and create a shortcut on the desktop. New shortcut. Okay. Go to Browse. Browse. There we go. Go to Black Hat. And go to the demos. Where's my file? Oh, there it is right there. Okay. Here we go. Wait a minute. That's not the executable though. Hold on. Try that. Go to next. File not found. I know. Let's try this other thing here. I'm not really making this up as I go along. Okay, let's go ahead and finish it. Myfile.txt. Okay. This looks like a file. Let's go in to Properties. And let's see. Here we go. Now, remember what that icon looked like. It took it. Whoa! It's kind of neat. Now, if we use solitaire, obviously you get a different icon, right? There you go. Okay, let's see what else we got. What are other ways we can execute it that are native to the Windows 2000 platform? Anybody know of any other ways? How about the run box? You know, most of the time I've seen these presentations up here, you know, I just use the start menu and go to programs and go to the DOS prompt, and you see a lot of people that open up the run box, type CMD, and boom, they got a command prompt. Well, let's try that. Let's try something similar to that. Okay. Run, not shut down. Okay. Let's see. Oops. Let's try this. FI. Okay. At this point, is anybody in a betting mood? Okay. Maybe I should have done this at the beginning, since I already knew the answers. Wow. Kind of neat. Remember, this isn't just working because it's Notepad. It's working because it's an executable. And I'm only using Notepad as an example. Use any arbitrary executable you want.
The process is still identified with my file.
Well, let's take a look at that. I'll go open it up again. I mean, it's in our run box. Still there?
I actually mentioned task managers.
Yeah, I'm going to go there. I just got very little space left on my taskbar there. There we go. Let's see, there's LSASS, there's service host, there's cmd.exe. Where do we go?
Isn't there a way, though, to tell your task manager what extensions you'll allow to run?
Huh. Tell your task manager?
Yeah, like, is there no way to tell the task manager, like, that file was way out of range? It's an executable, but it's identified with .txt.
Well, it's not. That's just it. The file that's actually, it's listed here is .txt, but the file that's actually running is an exe. It's got an exe extension. You know, with the .vbs files we saw with the testing there, you know, if we change the extension, it doesn't find the engine. It doesn't know what to do. Okay.
Did that work if you put it in the auto run and registry started that way?
Yes. If you put it in, and just because it takes a little bit of time to get through that, you can actually launch these from the run key in the registry. Yes?
Did you use these to protect a file from being infected by viruses?
Up until Benny and Ratter from 29A came out, yeah, you could. They came out with W2K Stream. It sort of used alternate data streams, in the sense that if it was on an NTFS file system, it would copy the original file, the original executable it infected, into the alternate data stream, and then infect the other file. So it'd make a copy of the uninfected file, and then infect the default stream. Well, if it hit a FAT system, there was no alternate data stream to copy the original file into, so it just infected the file. So it doesn't really use alternate data streams in this type of sense, but yes, it does use alternate data streams. So copying files into alternate data streams is not necessarily going to protect the file from being infected by a virus. Not anymore. Okay. Just one other. Let's take a look at using Notepad, for instance. Create a file. File2.txt. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to create it? Say yeah. Okay. This is a file. Pretty simple, straightforward. Save it. Close it. Okay. dir. So my file2.txt is 14 bytes long. Notepad, my file2.txt, hidden.txt. You want to create the file? Sure, why not? This is an alternate data stream. Okay, go ahead and save the file. Save, close it, dir. My file2.txt is still 14 bytes long. hide a lot of information. Output of commands, all we have to do is put that colon that was in the command line, put it in the right place for the different commands. It'll go ahead and use the alternate data stream. Take and run LADS one more time. There you go. Got a total of five alternate data streams. Any more questions on alternate data streams at this point?
If you put a second colon in there, it's an invalid name for a file.
Let's try it. What are we going to do? Type test.vbs because it's quick. myfile.txt : like that.
No, put something in between.
Like that.
Just call it another.
Hidden too.
Except you misspelled VBS.
I did? Oh, VBSF. Freudian slip, sorry. Okay. That look good? Parameters incorrect. But basically, if we just keep changing the name behind the first colon, we can just keep adding stuff. Yeah. You know, somebody that's truly malicious, you know, might create a tiny little file that just grabs kernel 32 DLL and starts dumping it into alternate data streams. If it happens fast enough, fill up your hard drive, boom, that's it. Okay. Let's move on to a couple of the other demonstrations that we've got here. I've got, I tell you what, let's try the touch one, because I really like to go through that. Let's see, we just created myfile.txt and myfile2.txt on the system. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, as you can see from the file listing here, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I have a batch file. Because what I did was, in order to break it up so that you can see what's going on, you know, in the Perl script, that when you download the zipped archive, you'll see that touch1.pl will actually change all three of the MAC times, all three of them. And then touch2 is only going to change the last access and last modified times. Now I haven't printed this information out, and the reason I have it in a batch file is because before and after each touch, I have it print out the times on the file as they are currently on the system for that file. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So instead of just having it all in one command, I wanted to show it broken out. So I've actually got it multiple steps. So let's go ahead and run. Touch, and I'll tell you what, we'll use myfile2.txt. Now this was actually an idea. I was just going to run it with one step. And the second step was an idea I got from Egon Casey, because he had this mischievous streak in him. There we go. Okay. There's the output. It fits on the screen. Let's take a walk through it. So we run the command. The first thing that gets, I didn't turn echo off, so you can kind of see what's going on. This is the touch demo for Black Hat. Then on to the next prompts. The first thing we do is we check the current file time. And what are the file times associated with it? Let's see. Friday, February 8th. Created at 3:47 and 3 seconds. Okay, yeah, that's today. This is based on, one time zone. So I haven't changed the system time. Last access. Well, last time we accessed it was, within a minute. Okay. So then we run the first touch. I set all the times to August 20th, 2005. Then I run the second touch. And I set all the dates for last access and last modification back to 1999. So according to the current information on this file won't be created for another 3 years, but it was just accessed 3 years ago. Does that make any sense? Of course not. Okay. But imagine being a forensics analyst and running across this. Now this actually uses the API, the Microsoft API. The file times are basically a 64-bit long, or actually two 32-bit numbers that get rammed together and processed. But all you need to do is, just follow documentation on the Microsoft site. That's all I did. I went to the Microsoft site and I followed the documentation. There's actually code out there that shows you how to do this in Visual Basic. This is, working code. Here's the source. How to do it in Visual Basic. Microsoft provides some information, some examples, some very simple examples in C++. But none of those examples showed what touch1.pl does, which is change all the access times. It's one of those things where I've got this functionality that I can do, but why would I bother changing? What's a legitimate purpose for changing the creation date? Well, probably not really any legitimate purpose, but you look at all the people with illegitimate motives out there, with malicious motives. So this is something that could be very, very easily used just to simply mask somebody looking for last access times on a system, even after the bit image copy of the drive is made. Okay, Egon Casey says he's taken a look at this as far as looking for artifacts left behind. As yet, he hasn't found any. I don't know of anybody else that has seen this, because I posted it on the net, I've talked about it, but nobody has yet come up with any artifacts left behind to indicate that this activity took place. Other than the utility actually existing on the hard drive, but there's all sorts of removable media. Now, also people investigating pornography and child pornography cases, fraud cases, those type of things, nobody that I've talked to has yet seen such utility used. Okay, but look, there it is right there. And again, I could just be pulling the wool over your eyes, but I'll give you the source code to this so you can look at it, mess with it, tell me I was right, tell me I was wrong. But there it is. Okay, I've got 2 more quick demos to run through. Really quick. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to disassemble or decompose a file. We're going to put those contents in alternate data streams. And for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to use Solitaire. And a nice little executable, pretty colorful. So let's go ahead and run decomp.pl. Okay. So Black Hat demonstration. There's not really anything to show other than the fact that it's decomposing Solitaire and placing in alternate data streams. Now let's see where those alternate data streams are. Oh, look at that. There you go. I chose an arbitrary file size just to break the files up into. And look, I just stuck them in sequential alternate data streams. Okay. Now before we go on with the second half, let's do a directory listing of recycler. File not found. Let's run the second half. Where did that come from? Okay. Well, of course, I just could have run it from its default location. But I didn't run it from its default location. That's where I ran it from the recycle bin. So what I've done with these 2 scripts that are available in the archive on the website, will be available through the Black Hat site, is I've taken Solitaire, an arbitrary executable, broken it down into arbitrarily sized segments, and placed those segments around the file system. Now, of course, for the purposes of the demonstration, it was a pretty simple process. It would be very easily detected. But alternate data streams are not the only places you can hide these segments. You can put them in regular files. You can put them any place on the system where you can write a string of 1s and 0s as long as you can access it. And then the reassembly code just pulls all the little bits and pieces back together. That runs fairly quickly. It's just grabbing some bytes here and some bytes there and ramming them together. And it creates the file wherever you want. Okay? So I can do this. I can run this again, reassem.pl again. Okay, it launches it. Now I'm going to leave this running. Open up another DOS prompt. Access. Okay. CD Black Hat BH demo 2. Okay. Whoops. Oops, sorry. Okay. There we go. There's the process that's running. not solitaire, not sol.exe, but bhsol2 for the purposes of this presentation, purposes of this utility. It's fairly simple, fairly straightforward, and automated. Okay? Well, I had one other demonstration that I was going to run, but everybody else is coming in now. It looks like it's time for the end of this presentation. I'll make sure that it's included in the archive that goes up on Black Hat. But basically the idea is, if you remember the slide where we had all the different colors that talked about combining techniques, that's exactly what it does. It uses solitaire, encrypts it, puts a header from just any other DLL on the top of it, and then goes back. The second half of the presentation, or the second half of the demonstration, strips off that header, decrypts it, and runs the file. Okay. At this point, does anybody have any questions about the information we've covered in the presentation at all? Yes.
Got a quick one.
Yes.
In the last batch of data streams, they created a bunch of data streams. Is each one running as an individual processing task?
The question was, when I created that last batch of alternate data streams, I had all these data streams that had the numbers on the ends, right? The sequential numbers. That's what you're talking about? Okay. Are they running as separate processes? Well, no, they're not processes.
Only one process running?
No, they're not running at all. When I decompose the file into separate segments and place them in alternate data streams, there's just a string of ones and zeros.
So nothing is actually
Nothing is actually running. Now, when I ran the second half of the demonstration and reassembled them into the recycler bin and then executed it, then the overall executable was running. Okay? Any other questions? All right, well, thanks a lot.